Okay, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. So I'm posting these videos at this time because, um, well, schools are closed. And I'm used to giving presentations and hearing presentations and stuff. So it's kind of a little strange to, you know, not be in that environment. So can post something, I guess. Um, and then inshallah, when life goes back to normal, we can just go back to, you know, presenting in our groups. Okay, um, so this came up, right? Some masjids are celebrating Eid today, and some people are celebrating tomorrow. So this is a general talk, but as usual, if you want to understand this, um, you know, situation, then please refer to, um, you know, scholars' websites to understand what the conversation is there. What I see, and I'm not sure if others see this as well, but basically, Muslims like to build masjids, right? It's just a thing. It's a lot of reward to build a masjid. So a lot of people just build masjids, but they don't really build like the whole um, plan of what's going to happen after building the masjid. So I think what happens is the people that come and visit these masajid um, are not consistent, right? Like because you travel, you stay somewhere, for example, in an area, and you go to the local masjid there, right? And so if you stay long enough, you start to be able to make decisions. So I think that some people sometimes naturally fall into like an authoritative um, position where they can make these decisions. So it's like an area that's a minority and no one really knows um, that there is a minority here, like there's a group of Muslims living here. And so somebody will end up making, big decisions like when to celebrate Eid, you know, um, and when you're traveling, sometimes you live in areas that are like technology reliant. And so um, you're sometimes just passing on like the information that uh, based on, you know, previous calculations, this month is ending on this and this day, right? So it's a reliance on, I think it's a reliance on technology for really big natural decisions. And as someone who does use technology a lot, sometimes, sometimes like um, nature comes above technology, right? Like technology that's like man-made is a great tool, you know, and shows a lot of, you know, human power, all of this stuff. But before humans were made, you know, nature was there. Nature isn't inferior to technology. It's just there, and it's how do you say this? It's not reliant on technology. Like you can manipulate some things in nature using technology, but then it just subsides, or so whoever, for example, said, okay, let's help humans, plan their years and months using calendars, and calculations that were made like years and years ago. Very nice of them to do that. However, I think that sometimes when you get too involved with like calculations and all of this stuff, you kind of forget that, well, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala manages his entire creation, and he was managing it before humans came up with different kinds of technology and stuff like that. So when someone like uses, very minimal technology and can sight the moon, you know, directly or whatever, and then someone else is like, well, this has already been planned for us a long, long time ago, you'll end up having two reads. And I think the conversation needs to change from it being a feud to, let's talk about how some things that we were just born into were planned by people that came before us who had no idea who we are as a generation, right? For example, let's say I come up with some kind of technological device and I'm hoping that this is going to solve blah blah problem for the next generation, right? And that's what you do, like when you're in this lifetime, like you have teachers and stuff, and you just fall into some kind of school or something, and like they just monitor you as you get creative and do something that maybe it'll be patented, maybe it won't. And some things that get patented, I don't think they're all listening. A lot of them are just so busy living that they're not really going to think about or factor in Islam or Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in their daily decisions. Um, and we all go through these days sometimes where it's like, I don't know, you get busy with something and you forget, I don't know, you forget someone important in your life, or you forget astaghfirullah, you're not as mindful of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? So anyway, what I'm trying to say is that technology is nice and convenient sometimes, but you can't rely on inanimate things for things that are more significant than this inanimate thing. For example, let's say you had a really important phone call with someone in Australia. and you're, I don't know, in Sudan, you're in Khartoum and you have this conversation with someone in Sydney, right? Over the phone. And you made a lot of plans and this and that, right? But what you need, for example, is immediate. It's like, it's great we had this conversation over the phone. Alhamdulillah for the phone. Alhamdulillah for it, making things easier. And I can imagine how exciting the phone was like for the first group of people who used it and stuff. It's exciting. Um, but if you have a conversation and you're like miles and miles and miles away, whatever it is that you talked about on that phone call is not gonna happen so immediately compared to if this person was with you right there, right? So technology sometimes is like, I don't know, it's borderline like, it's like a strange transition from when you were very, very little and you had actual toys, like you had things that you played with, you know? And then all of a sudden, you're growing or you become an adult or something, or you transition into adulthood, and some things you still see as toys, like a play car or something like that, and some things you don't see as a toy, right? So I don't know, by the time like we saw like old cell phones, they were not very serious to us. I don't know, it's weird because the phone kept evolving, into other things and whatever. So what I'm trying to say is like, it's great that we can do calculations and we can calculate so many cool things. Alhamdulillah, like working the brain and all of this stuff. It's great. However, sometimes we need to just put that aside, you know, put aside um, the put aside the technology and live with the earth, live with the sun or the moon or whatever. And I don't mean to sound very like too, I don't know if there's even a term, but too earthy and I don't know, um, what's the word? Primitive and stuff like that. But there isn't really there isn't really a distinction, a fine distinction between being connected to like earth versus technology. It's not like that because even technology was is put together from things that were on earth. Anyway, when it comes to Eid is a big deal. It's a bigger deal than you know it's a bigger deal than we think. It's something that unites Muslims. Alhamdulillah that like Eid, like, the issues are usually just a day or two or something and not like over days and weeks and stuff like that. However, in that moment when um, they decide that there's two Eids, and for example, you have family that lives in one city and another family that lives in another city, and they're celebrating Eid on different days. It's it's just that discrepancy there can cause like, confusion at that time. Anyway, um, Islam is something to study over a lifetime. Like, it's not something that is like, you know, that you kind of read about on the side and then you can just kind of, you know, not understand it. I think it's something to understand so that hopefully, inshallah, like we'll have one Eid someday, you know? Um, and then maybe someday, inshallah, like we'll fully understand the life of the Prophet ﷺ as best as we can, and then like take from his life um, the things that we need to do verbatim, and then the things that you know are discussable because they have to be discussed, not because people like to just sit and discuss things, right? Um, and yeah, the less we take things verbatim, like the big things from the Prophet ﷺ, um, the less we do that, the more we give power to ourselves and other humans. And then his sunnah and his way of life will not fully be passed on. And I think we're experiencing this now in this generation because there is too much discussion on why he did things the way he did, you know, and discussing him. Yes, he's a human, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He was a human, but the Sharia and all of this stuff, this was from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? Like, this was not by him. So we don't discuss him like we discuss political people in our lifetime right now. We don't, you know, say, well, I think he should have done this or I think he should have done that. Um, you know, it's a total submission to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Um, Conversation sometimes I think is fine and stuff, but there are some things like how you pray, how you make wudu, you know, Eid, Ramadan, Hajj, these things like we're only supposed to be discussing um, how to perform these rituals, not why and why isn't it this way and not that way and stuff. Unless the Prophet did say you can do it this way or that way, right? So, anyways, what we call technology today might have not been viewed as technology at the time of the Prophet ﷺ. It might not have been taken seriously because they had their own hadara and civilization, and you know, they had things, that um, we're unable to use at this time because of our, you know, because of our reliance on other things um, to do things for us. Not saying it's good or bad, but I'm just saying that there they did have a civilization that was very strong, and they had things like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said تتخذون مصانع, right? So you have like things, um I don't know how to say this, but basically they did have some sort of technology. It's just a little different. Anyways, um the more the technology is connected with the earth and the processes of the earth and stuff, the better results you get. Yeah, cool. For example, like how much work goes into making a car um detect a lot of things versus riding on something that already knows, you know. So, like there's a way to take this and that, you know. There's a way to follow the sunnah and still kind of be social in how you operate technology and stuff. Just need to know when to use it, when not to use it, you know? Sometimes it makes me so tired, you know, when I see the amount of computers there are in the world, the amount of computers there are in one place, the amount of computers there are in schools, right? It's just bulk. Like it comes in bulk, right? And before it was like a special thing. And now it's like there's so many computers that um you're just like um how do I explain this? It's like it's just there in such an abundance that when you try to, like, let's say you open a computer and find that there's already things there from someone else, right? And subhanAllah, sometimes, like, when you're not explicitly taught something and you, for example, just learned how to read something, and then let's say you come and open a computer, and then on the computer it says Eid is on Sunday. So what do? You go say Eid is on Sunday because you read it. You just read it, right? Um, I remember when we were younger, for example, like we learned to read English, right? So um, when you're in a public place and you see signs, you're just reading the sign and you're doing what the sign is saying, right? You don't know if the sign is right, wrong, whatever, but you learn to read and you learn to just follow signs. So yeah, so sometimes let's just wrap this talk up. Um, like I said, um, I've seen masajid that people are saying, let's make a waqf, let's just make a masjid. And people know that there is a masjid, you can go into the masjid and you can pray, right? But it doesn't mean that every single masjid has access to um, scholars and scholars who really do understand the Sunnah and really try to um, share the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ with zero, like, zero self, like extra self benefit and stuff like that. Um, yeah, so two Eids. Inshallah, next Eid will only be one Eid. Um, because the day starts at night, like in lunar calendars, so it's like so the day starts at night, and so there's a time right in the middle. Like, let's say you celebrated Eid on Saturday, and then the end of your Eid is um, mm, Asr to Maghrib of Saturday, and then the beginning of the Eid of the person who's celebrating on Sunday starts Maghrib time to the next Maghrib. So that Asr time of Saturday, I feel like that's Eid. That's the Eid time because that's like it brings together the 2 days, right? Like it's the time that those people want to visit or want to talk to their family or message them and stuff like that. And then this, it's I think that's like the joined time between the two groups. Not that I'm advocating for two Eids, but I'm advocating for unity under the umbrella of the Sunnah. So um, instead of, making it worse and saying, like, what is this division? Everybody who's transgressing is bad and this and that. You can't really, can't say that because, like I said, a lot of people, I don't know, like a lot of people, like Arabic is not their first language, so they're trying sometimes, trying their best to uphold some Islamic things, without the Arabi and all that. Anyway, so that's that. Okay, so I'm gonna talk a little bit about emotional intelligence and marriage. This is maybe the first time I talk about this. And I'm not someone who studied emotional intelligence as a course. I studied language as courses. I've taken a lot of courses, but my core courses were on language and linguistics and stuff. So I never really got to studying it as um, in the level of interacting emotionally. Like it was a lot of just teaching um, basic communication in different places. So like we teach, a lot of like how do you function in the grocery store? How do you function in I don't know, clinic? How do you function in a airport? Things like that. But we don't really get into um, talking about how language works emotionally. And that's huge. And I never really delved into that before. Um, it's scary. I think I'd need to do it as a course. However, um, however, um, because of um, Muslims usually taking marriage very seriously, and its contract and all of this stuff is a serious thing. I didn't really think about how important EI is before the marriage, right? The earlier you understand EI, the better your marriage will be, I think, like as a Muslim couple. and the better like life will be for the children as well. Um, so I'm only saying this now because when people um, ask about, potential spouses and stuff like that, especially like when you're in a place where there's mm, Muslim families that don't really interact much, um, or there are reverts like to Islam who don't really communicate with the Arab speaking families, for example. And so, you know, you hear a lot of talk about how to find a spouse and all of this stuff. And it's no different, you know, um, as a Muslim or a non Muslim. Like, marriage needs EI, it needs it. This is not like, this isn't, um, how do you explain it? This isn't a simple contract. This is a big contract. And so to make it work long term, um, there needs to be an understanding on like both directions about emotions. And what we see sometimes is that one side dominates, and then the other side is just a recipient. And then people say, that marriage, they might see that marriage is working out. Wallahu alam, everyone's got, their own relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. However, the more you read about EI, the I think the better like the marriages will be, because how do I explain this? Like, I don't think the wife's emotions are more important than the husband's, and I don't think that the husband's emotions are more important than the wife's. And I don't think that, when you have children and stuff, that their emotions are always to be put first. That's where the intelligence kind of comes in, like who needs what when. And the better that's managed, the better um, the unit will work. Okay. Um, However, I think the opposite of emotional intelligence is possibly manipulation from both sides and from the kids. And I think that is a big topic on its own. However, um, I think that I don't think that people always recognize that they're manipulating if it's something they've been doing for so long. And, maybe their livelihood depends on it, maybe their work or the way they get their income, something like that. Um, like the manipulation started a long time ago, and you kind of just adopted those methods, to keep going and stuff. Um, but anyway, I'm talking about this now because, um, like I said, when you're like, when you see Muslim families sometimes being approached, um, to help find spouses and things like that, the the because like a lot of Muslim families do see marriage as a good thing, not everyone's going to be able to talk about EI before they work on the hookup. Okay. Um, so how do you explain this better? I think it needs to come all together. Like if you get approached um, seriously um, in referrals or something like that, then before you just say like, yes, this is a good person or this is a good spouse or whatever, um, you want to talk about EI. And if you can't discuss EI, then you might not be the right person to um, continue with the marriage referral. And I'm talking like very carefully about this because um, if you do help with this stuff, then it's easy for the shaitan or for your nafs to say, it's easy for the shaitan or the nafs to say, um, you don't know enough about EI, so you should never uh, try to help with this stuff. Okay. And what happens there is it just goes like that kind of help that you provide moves on to someone else, or um, which is good, right? Like if you can't do it and it moves on to someone else, that's good. But if it doesn't move to someone else and you actually did an okay job with it, or you did a good job with it, um, that's just um, the shaitan or the nafs moving khair away from you out of jealousy and fear and all of these things. So eventually, like as a Muslim, eventually you wanna, yes, you wanna like kind of master a few things that you can kind of focus on and be helpful in. However, um, if you know, have been kind of born into a Muslim family, sometimes like you just kind of do things because you've watched it for so long, right? Like you've watched people help with, I don't know, moon sighting, or you've watched um, people um, know how to um, help with, spousal findings and stuff like that. Um, Also, like, finally, one last message because this is kind of funny. Um, Sometimes, like, if you are in a masjid or something and someone comes and they are a single parent when there's a child, for example, sometimes they say that they're looking for a spouse because they need help with their child, you know? And that's normal. Like that to me, that's very normal. Like you have a child, and usually a child needs two parents. That's just the usual thing, right? So I understand when they do that. However, I don't think they fully understand that, like I said, they might not know what I said in the beginning, which is that some masajid don't really have a consistent community. So it's not like you can just knock on a masjid door and say, I need a spouse, you know, number one, because not all masajid, like I said, have consistent people in it. Um, and the dynamics of Muslim families do change as well. You know, it's not everything is set in stone. Things do change day by day. Things change, people move, you know, all of this stuff. So it's not like you can say, okay, hold on, you know, and go to a shelf somewhere. Um, it's not like that, first of all. Um, Secondly, when someone is saying that they need a spouse to help them with the child, that needs to become a conversation because there's two things. You needing help with your child sometimes does not mean a spouse. Sometimes it means that you need to figure out what services they need, you know? Um, Unless you meet a spouse who knows how to raise a child. That makes sense. Um, some spouses will help you with only a few things, not everything, especially because that child is not their child. So there, you know, there has to be a huge distinction between what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does for you and for your child and what a human or a spouse or a husband or a wife will be able to help you with. And if you don't meet the right person, like based on your child's personality and all of this stuff, doesn't solve the problem right away. Do you see how these conversations can go sometimes? They can go many ways. Um, and my um, my advice is always to build your network of um, trusted scholars, trusted scholars who are older in age, um, and a bit younger. I think, you know, like that way you kind of live a more serious life where um, you're not just kind of Googling things all the time, where you're not like, I don't know, you're not just kind of trying to live a, your life like so freely, and just when you need something, um, scream out for help or whatever. What you want to do, um, just like you have a list of contacts for different things, you need to have a list of scholarly contacts. And then um, that way, like you will be kind of in touch, like on a daily, weekly, monthly basis, whatever, you'll be in touch in with what these scholars have passed down from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and you don't have to be so worried about your, you know, I don't know how to say this, but like the lack of consistency in the area that you live in and things like that. If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala writes for you that you can visit the Haramain, you know, or visit areas that have trusted scholars and things like that. Um, if you get to do that, great. You know, we can ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make that easier for you. And you can hopefully, you know, learn directly from a scholar or be around an area that has a trusted scholar. And when I say trusted scholar, I'm going to end with this. When I say trusted scholar, like I said before, someone who is passing down the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ without manipulating it for their own wants, needs, whatever, things like that. You know, if if you talk to a scholar and they're human, طبعا, they are human, and um, they they need something, you can start to assess whether that need is um, normal, like a normal need, right? So let's say a scholar who teaches Islam and does not, doesn't abuse people, doesn't abuse, I don't know, other mm, people that they teach and stuff like that. If you meet them and they need physical help or something like that, I understand that. I totally understand that. But and this is what I mean by finding trusted scholars, because some people have a lot of information about Islam and it's great, alhamdulillah, but deep down they're still not um, disciplined enough when it comes to abuse of other people. And every area has apparently a different um, every area has their own kind of ideas about what is abuse and what is normal and stuff. But there should be a universal kind of guideline of what is abuse. All right, I'm gonna end here. Say Eid Mubarak and Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.